day and welcome to the Farm to Plate Global Launch event. We are so glad you're here. Please let us know who you are and where you're tuning in from in the chat. You can find on the right side of the auditorium. I'm Pamela Miller, host of Future Foodcast podcast, coming from Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Future Foodcast is sponsored by Farm to Plate, and we are proud to be releasing our 141st episode tomorrow. The podcast is served to bring current topics to our audience and industry expertise to the public, while also providing valuable industry insight and information to inform the Farm to Plate product offering. The Farm to Plate platform is designed to enable stakeholders to better manage their food and beverage supply chains. You'll hear more about that after our panel discussion. If you're pressed for time or have just come for product information, the demo zone and networking lounge will be open at 15 minutes after the hour. My colleagues, Mika Liss and Bill Ritchie, who you'll see later on the stage, will be in the chat in the auditorium. Let's kick off our panel discussion about the future of food, safety, security, retail, and branding, how ESG is changing consumer demand in the food and beverage industry. Please welcome our expert panelists. As the Vice President and Managing Director of Caravella Coffee, Carlos de Valendebro is responsible for North American operations, including sales, logistics, quality, and finance. Caravella has their own sourcing and exporting operations in 7 countries, from Mexico to Peru. They have chosen to work primarily with over 4,000 farmer partners, ensuring they all earn full value for their high-quality coffee and creating a transparent marketplace where the higher the quality, the higher the pay. Tariq Haddad is the founder and CEO of Peace by Chocolate. After being a Syrian refugee, Tariq and his family were welcomed to Canada on a community-based sponsorship. Passionate about peace and entrepreneurship, he relaunched the family business that was destroyed in Syria to recreate the chocolates they once exported across the Middle East. As the Vice President of Sales for Calavo Growers, Kate Brooks has been instrumental in driving the company's growth and success in this industry. She's a solutions provider for the fresh food sector, providing innovative strategies that have helped Calavo growers establish a strong presence in this market. Kate has been an integral part of their efforts to continue the growth and execution of their fresh food strategies. Adam Preth is the CTO and co-founder of Hazel Technologies. At Hazel, Adam develops new technologies and leads technical business development. Adam earned his PhD in chemistry from Northwestern University, where he found a new passion for agriculture. He co-founded Hazel Technologies to address a giant challenge in the modern food economy, food waste. Dr. Madhav Durba is the Vice President of Supply Chain Strategy at Coupa Software, where his team helps customers and prospects solve various supply chain challenges. With 25 years in the supply chain industry, Dr. Durba has broad experience in strategy and process consulting, supply chain software, program management, software application development and deployment, machine learning, and data science. Let's get started with our discussion. First of all, ESG is an environmental, social, and corporate governance framework that is being adopted across the globe. Consumers are understanding more about this, and it has an effect on how the global food industry is operating. As we think about the life cycle of the foods that we eat, it starts with growing. Some companies dedicate a lot of resources in this very first step. Carlos, can you please share about how you source your coffee beans and the investment that you make?
Pam, good morning, and good morning to everyone joining us today. So we've created a very unique model in which we've invested millions of dollars creating a supply chain in 7 different countries in South America and Central America over the last 20 years, in which we found small farmers who have no access to the roasters, to the actual marketplace, 2 hectare, 3 hectare farmers had no access to education, no access to quality. So on the other end, we found roasters always struggling to find the best coffees out there. Not your traditional commodity coffee, but the best coffees out year on a year basis. So what we created is a very simple model in which we educate and train those farmers. Over 80% of our employees are at origin. We have a large presence of agronomists, and we train them and kind of jumpstart their practices, how they pick their labor, how they pick their coffee, how they ferment coffee, how they actually process that cherry to make it into a product that has top quality. And it's a very simple model in which the higher the quality, the higher they get paid. In some cases, they can get 300% over, let's say, commercial coffee, which creates a very virtuous cycle in which these farmers are not thinking of going to the big cities to find a better job. They're actually thinking about investing back into the farms, investing back into the communities. And on the other end, coffee roasters are always struggling, and to a certain extent, we're risk managers for them. How can you make sure you get the coffee when you need it, the quality you need it, over and over in time? Because it is an agricultural product. And we've created this system in which over 20 years, we've been able to deliver year after year the best quality and see the benefits on the field of farmers that were 2 hectares 20 years ago now being 10-hectare farmers, actually buying of land of farmers who are not that committed to quality and farmers who are willing to go that extra mile. We kind of say many times that farm is an activity that you need to be really in love with, and many farmers in the past did it because they had no option. In this case, the farmers, the over 4,000 farmers that we work with, have that strong commitment to the product. And we're always kind of joking with our customers is that coffee is not actually made just by a tree, but actually produced by a farmer. So we're also trying to elevate that speech to say, hey, who is this? Who are these farmers? And provide a full transparency and full traceability. That if you're a consumer, not even a roaster, but you go to your local coffee shop in any place, let's say here in the States, you can easily find, okay, where is this coffee coming from? How much is this coffee worth? Why is this coffee more expensive? What goes into this higher quality product that fetches a higher price? And that way we can ensure that these farmers stay here for the long run. And as sustainability, going back to your SSG, we also say it starts by the pocket. If the farmers have a good income, they're actually making a profit with their coffee. We can then continue the conversation. How can we improve labor practices? How can we improve sustainability practices? How can you make your farm a little bit more green? And it goes from, again, making sure they have a good livelihood to making sure they have enough money to support their families. So that's what we've been creating over the last 20 years with 7 exporting operations out of Central America and have what we call importing or customer relationship offices here in the US, in Australia, to a certain extent, a voice that we're representing them and ensure that roasters do not have to be worried, okay, what's the coffee I'm going to get? How do I, if this is a core part of my business, I get it at the right quality year after year.
Yeah, Carlos, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a model for all different kinds of growers and producers, and putting that investment back into those who are growing and producing to help them produce the highest quality product and also get paid for that, because we want them to keep farming. That's the whole thing about the social piece of it, and taking care of our environment, doing a good job in their growing. So thank you so much for sharing that. From your work with the fresh food space, Kate, how are you answering the impact that ESG framework has on what consumers want from you?
Yes. Good morning, Pam. And I have to say, there's kind of an aspect of me that wanted to say, yes, what Carlos just said.
Yes, I know all of you on the panel.
It's a 100-year agriculture company. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, all of those things. I agree. I think what's interesting is that the consumer has gotten so much more educated in how their food comes to them. You know, it's not just magic. And I loved what Carlos said, is it just doesn't appear from a tree. There's a farmer involved and so much more. There's, you know, from our perspective, we've got both that commodity side and the processing side. And there's so much art and science that goes into that. I think as our consumer looks at ESG for us, they're probably most focused on the environmental. growing and processing food requires so much water, energy, recycled products that have to be considered. And I think the consumer has gotten much more tuned in to how companies are treating that responsibly. For us as a company, it actually 2022 was a very exciting year because we published our first ESG goals publicly. So we published them to the employees and then we published them to the investment community, which was a big change for us to really embrace that and start to figure out how we're going to address that as an entire organization and how we're going to face forward. So I'm really proud of the work we've done. I'm really proud of the goals we've set to reduce our carbon footprint. We've got aggressive goals through 2025 and more through 2030 in terms of carbon neutrality, as well as water reduction and use. So it's been a great year. From a social component, I think we share a lot of the same goals that Carlos does. We work with a lot of growers internationally, figuring out how do we invest in their communities? How do we make sure we're giving back? How do we make sure that they can continue to farm sustainably? How can we ensure that they continue to farm successfully? And I think our consumer is more and more interested all the time in that story and making sure that they can support that with their purchase.
Wow, that's great. And you're right. The environmental piece is so important on that front end, and the resources and making the best use of them and just being smart so that we can continue into the future. Does another panelist have a comment about this question they'd like to engage with Kate?
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that.
Please.
Pam. I agree with the environmental impact aspect of it. One of the things that we are seeing is that supply chains have a major role to play in terms of the carbon footprint contribution and even use of single-usage plastic, right? So some of the work that we are seeing in my experience working with Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 food and beverage manufacturers is there is this increased focus towards ensuring that the supply chain is designed so that you reduce the spoilage in transit, right? You're reducing wastage associated with that. And when the supply chains are running more efficiently, one of the byproducts is carbon footprint reduction associated with that, right? So I think the supply chains have a massive role to play as well as the packaging aspect of it, right? How do you reduce the single-use plastic? How do you make sure recycling is only partial fix, right? Can we extend the logic of, say, farm to plate to farm to farm or farm to field, right? Where everything is biodegradable and making sure that you're closing the loop and turning the supply chain circular is a major initiative for a lot of companies that we work with. Just wanted to share that perspective in addition to what Kate was talking about.
Thank you, Madhav, because Kate and I have had a conversation about the whole packaging. You know, when you're working in fresh food and sometimes cutting or preparing some of that fresh food for consumers to buy that way, that's a big concern for Calavo growers and being, good stewards of those resources, right, Kate?
Yeah, packaging is an interesting challenge, and trying to find the right balance of sustainable, recyclable, compostable, completely, to Madhav's point, completely losing the word, but then also protecting the quality of the product as it ships, right? And the shelf life and the consumer experience. So it's an interesting line to walk to make sure we're doing the right thing in all areas.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, one big concern is getting the fresh fruits and vegetables where they need to go in excellent condition. Adam, can you tell us how you're innovating to impact the traditional restrictions we have around food systems globally?
Absolutely. And I feel like that the lead in from Carlos and Kate was perfect because we had a couple different themes that were connected there around quality as a differentiator for the grower, and around waste as a way, reducing waste as a way to address ESG related concerns. I really see those two things as a continuity. So the more we push quality up, lower our waste is, And that's not just fruit that's thrown away. It's also fruit that's sold at suboptimal prices. So when fruit arrives and it's grade 1, it's going to get the best price. The grower wants that condition. The grower doesn't want to be paid for a grade 2. They want to get paid for grade 1. And the consumer wants to have more grade 1. So it's really along the same line. And when we think about how to improve quality in the supply chain, I think we can probably break it into 2 different elements. One is just time. I think that's the one everybody has an intuition for. The more time that the supply chain has to deliver a perishable with quality to its final point of consumption, the better, because that increases the likelihood it will arrive as you would like it to arrive, even if there are disruptions in the supply chain. We saw certainly water freight costs skyrocket in the last year, and that was very impactful to supply chains. So it's more time, and then it's also resilience. So look, we can't plan for every single eventuality in the supply chain. Sometimes you might have a cold chain. Sometimes somebody leaves a pallet on a dock a little bit too long. It's a little bit too warm. And so our products are really designed from the perspective of delivering both more time and more resilience. And we do that by, for example, slowing the respiration of fruit, slowing the ripening of fruit. And we have designed packaging and shelf life extension technologies that specifically respond to fluctuations in temperature as part of that resilience mandate. We're doing this all around the world now. So really music to my ears and great lead-in. So thank you to Carlos and Kate.
Well, you're welcome. We had a conversation about food ecosystems that I thought was so interesting, especially with the fresh fruits and vegetables. And, traditionally, there's only a certain area. Can you speak to a little bit? I know you can say it better than I can to explain that concept.
I will absolutely give it a shot. So, when we think about different food ecosystems around the world, perishable goods are really, there is some transference of perishable goods from the Americas to Europe or from the Americas to Asia. And those are high value cases. But when you think about volume basis, fresh produce is really transferred in a series of ecosystems around the world, up and down across our latitudes, which makes sense because there's seasonality associated with this. The interesting outcome of that, though, is that some types of fresh fruits and produce have evolved in different types of climates and have different considerations around storage. So if you have, for example, a peach is very well behaved in cold storage. You can go down to 0 degrees Celsius, half a degree Celsius, and really, really slow down the respiration of that peach and put it to sleep. But you can't do the same thing with an avocado. Because if you do, the avocado, which evolved in tropical and subtropical climates, is going to experience chill injury. So there's really this interesting biologically driven consideration around the crops that we eat as a planet that has its foundation in what those crops need. So really high latitudes, that's far north and far south, have an advantage in this because the crops that are native or easily grow in those climates can be more easily refrigerated. And of course, that ripples through the supply chain for fresh fruits and vegetables. And I think that's an area of interest for us. There's so much amazing produce in the tropics that's really waiting to be discovered by a lot of the world.
So there's a lot of possibilities still out there. Thank you for your technology and your explanation of that. I appreciate it. Madhav, you deal with the challenges that are currently facing the supply chain every day, and you spoke about a couple of those. Can you share those that are related to food security and food safety?
Sure. First of all, I think of food security and food safety as 2 sides of the same coin, right? So just to define the terms a little bit, when I think about food security, it's about making sure that the food is accessible. Nutritious, high quality food is accessible to all demographics, all population across the globe is the way to think about it. And then when I think about food safety, it is whatever we are consuming, whatever we are ingesting into our bodies is fit for human consumption, right? So making sure that the safety aspect is addressed as well. So when I look at it, Adam made a very interesting observation, which is extending the shelf life of the product using some of the newer technologies and storage techniques, etc. What that buys from a supply chain standpoint is you get a longer lead time to get the product to the shelf, right, without the spoilage. So that's going to be critical in terms of ensuring that food security is there. The other thing I already touched upon is this idea of designing your supply chain networks such that you're reaching hard to access areas as well. So being thoughtful about that, making sure that you're delivering the shelf life stable products or products with sufficient shelf life left on them to various pockets of the world is going to be absolutely critical, and supply chains have a critical role to play. The other idea is what I talked through of this idea of optionality. What do I mean by that? If you look at the geopolitical conflict that's happening in Ukraine, that has caused some grain shortage across the globe. Even when you go back to the days of the pandemic, there was meat shortage. Why did that happen? A lot of the meat is domestically sourced in the United States, right? However, there is a concentration risk even in that supply chain, domestic supply chain, when a lot of your slaughter capacity is contained to few high volume manufacturing facilities. That results in a concentration risk. So diversifying these risks and building this optionality, I really love the point that Carlos made about reaching out to these smaller farmers as well. That's a way of creating optionality in your supply chain, right? So I absolutely love that point. The other thing is climate change concern. We already talked about that. We talked about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing the burden from single-use plastic and packaging materials. Why is that important? Because these environmental factors have an implication on climate change, got an implication on crop cycles and crop yields, right? So that directly ties back to food security issues. Let's talk about food safety. Food safety, I would break it down into two components. One is ensuring that you have that farm-to-plate traceability, making sure that you understand and be able to track every link within your supply chain. And when the change of custody is happening, making sure that the food that we are receiving is not being tampered with. All it takes is one weak link in your supply chain, right? So the other thing is this idea of KYC, know your supplier's supplier, right? So it's really going back to that accountability on behalf of ultimately the vendors, the sellers of the food to the consumers, and having that traceability is going to be absolutely critical. So those are some thoughts I just wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. Those are some really important points that I know touch on every area of the food space and every one of our panelists as well. Let's move on. When it comes to creating brand that is delivering, branding is so important. And Tariq, when you think about creating a brand that delivers on the promise to make the world a better place, you certainly have done that. Can you tell us what you've created and how consumers are reacting to your philanthropic business model?
Absolutely. Good morning, Pam, and thank you very much, my fellow panelists. Madhav, I should connect you with our food safety manager. I would love talking to you for sure. And Carlos, I love starting the talk with coffee. I think this is all that we need really this morning. We should create Peace by Coffee sometime. Well, folks, my name is Sarek Haddad. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Peace by Chocolate here on the East Coast of Canada. My family and I came to Canada only a few years ago as Syrian refugees after we lost our factory back home. And the reason why I'm really excited to be with you today is because I wanted to tell you, people nowadays are not buying products, they're buying stories. And to be honest, our entire mission has been, since we came to Canada, is to tell a positive story about food, because we are about people and passions coming together to advocate for a cause. In a time when there's so much anxiety around the world right now, especially around the uncertainty and food security, we found out that people need some comfort, and chocolate is a product of comfort. We found out that a brand building element is now really about selling a product. It's about selling a story. And nowadays, with as my fellow panelists have mentioned, with the consumers have been the most educated of all time. They are aware about where their food comes from, how it is packaged, who packaged it, who's selling it, who's selling their story, where they are buying it from, and all the elements that are included in it. I feel like we are in a time when we need to bring the food element into two things: reinvention and renewal. reinvention and renewal into our food and supply chains are very important in a time when it is so critical really to advocate for causes that matter to people. And that's why we call our business Peace by Chocolate, because without peace, no one can go to work. No one can build businesses. You cannot raise kids. We cannot have this conversation without peace. Like if any of us really felt that we are in a negative peace, as we call it, because peace is not only the absence of war and conflict, it is really something that we should strive for, to have positive interactions and relationships with the people around us. Bringing it back to the food element, when we started our business back here in Canada, we felt that chocolate and the industry has been kind of contaminated with this repetition about, the fair trade element and the idea behind child labor and how chocolate really is being farmed and how cocoa farmers are getting their fair share of the entire industry. Because trust me, chocolate was not originated in Europe. Cocoa does not grow in Europe. Cocoa does not grow in Canada. We need the cocoa farmers in Colombia and Ivory Coast to sustain our industries. And that's what we felt is our mission needs to be about giving these people really their fair share. We are now part of called Cocoa Horizon, and that we ensure that there is no child labor. We ensure that cocoa farmers have their fair share of the pay. But at the same time, at the end of the finished product, we created products that speak peace in 24 different languages. If you go on our website now, peacebychocolate.ca, and sorry, Pam, this is not advertising. I was explicitly told not to make any advertising, but you guys can really learn more about our story and how we ended up in this situation where we need to tell actually more than the chocolate story. We need to tell the story about how a product is made and how our people, actually our team, believe in 5 top values, which I really hope you all write it down if you could, whoever is listening, whoever is joining. We care about passion, enthusiasm, advocacy, contribution, and excellence. And if you bring anyone from our team, they really believe in what I believe in. They really believe in the mission of our business, and they really believe in the leadership of a food business in a time when we really can use food as a way to connect instead of letting it be a barrier. So in terms of building the brand that we really hope it's going to be one of the top 5 chocolate companies in Canada within the next few years, I really hope that whoever is watching now can really even watch our movie. It is called Peace by Chocolate. It is available worldwide right now to understand how we ended up here and how we are using our platform to advocate for this cause. We have partnerships that we built right now with Indigenous communities in Canada. We have partnerships with Refugee Hub to help other refugees arriving in the country. We have partnerships with the Canadian Mental Health Association, partnerships with the Red Cross. And when the war started in Ukraine last year, we said how we can use our food business to give back and donate proceeds to the humanitarian crisis appeal with the Red Cross to help Ukrainians fleeing their homes, seeking shelter, clean water, food, and whatever other necessities they might need it. And now when the earthquakes hit Syria and Turkey, my homeland, we felt we have that responsibility as leaders in the business to also run a campaign with the Red Cross. And we are so happy and honored that over $250,000 were raised in and we are continuing this campaign until the next month. So my mission and my goal has been always, to spread this good pieces around the mission and the vision that we have. And we always say we're not in the business of chocolate, we're in the business of peace. So I encourage everyone really to learn more about how they can use their own food brands beyond selling just a food product for consuming, but really something that we can all celebrate and reflect upon.
Thank you so much, Tariq. You have lived it. You're coming out of that and reaching back to help others who are in similar situations to you. But I think consumers these days really want to be part of something bigger, and they really do want to give back. So a lot of food companies are engaging in things like that, and it's a great brand story. I really appreciate you sharing yours. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. I'm sorry that we didn't have all day to talk with you, because I feel like each of you has such a rich background in the industry. And I encourage our participants today to check out our panelists and their companies. They're doing some great work around the world. Thank you to each of you for being with us today.